Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I'm your host, Kevin L. Powers, and I'm also the owner-operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and I want to welcome you to our program today. Now, we are doing something really special today, because normally what we do is we would take an individual horror film, and me and my special guest will talk about that horror film. But today, we're starting something new, or something we hope will be new for you all who are listening to our podcast, which is kind of a roundtable discussion. Which really just means that I'm going to bring up a topic, and whoever's here on the show is my special guest. We're going to discuss that topic. And of course, the topic for the day is the problem with modern horror films. And to kind of get us started with this whole roundtable discussion, I brought on Philip Ray, who has done lots of great other conversations with me on the show. So it's going to be interesting for us to talk about this. Thank you, Philip, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So this is going to be a little bit different for all of you listening out there. I will kind of start off the whole thing by asking some questions, and then we're going to see where it goes, okay? So just sit back, relax, and listen to our conversation about the problems with modern horror films. So this being said, Philip, we all know, there are good horror films and there are bad horror films, but right now, we are having a great and financially great couple of years with horror films, but within those horror films, there are always a few bad apples out there. Just a few bad apples sometimes. It used to be where we used to have lots of bad apples, but we're going to discuss some of the reasons why those bad apples are there. So Philip, I'm going to ask you first because I have a lot of questions to ask you, but I'm going to ask you first. What do you think is one of the big reasons why we have so many bad apples when it comes to modern day horror films?
So it's interesting because, horror movies have always been, like there's always been a lot of horror movies, but I think what has changed a lot in filmmaking nowadays is versus back in like the 90s and 80s and 60s and stuff is budgets. And what I mean by that is a lot of times now with studios, they're wanting to, they're wanting the success. They want the big successes. And that has become horror movies now. Well, horror movies back then, there's not always a guarantee if a horror movie comes out for it to be a success. But it's interesting nowadays, a lot of times, Blumhouse is like the prime example of that, of small budget. Most of the time it makes its budget back and it's a big success. I mean, again, most of the thing that's Blumhouse's bread and butter. Like if you can look at all of their stuff, and the thing is, other companies start picking up on that. They're like, oh, we want a quick, like little buck. Let's just do a horror movie. And so I think we're seeing more horror movies just out the gate more often a year than it feels like when we did like in the 80s and 90s and 70s and stuff. Is that now just everyone wants to get in the game of horror, of doing the horror movies and stuff. And of course, the more you crank out, the more and less quality you'll have with that. Because if everyone's doing it, you're going to get a lot more bads than goods. Again, not to say that we haven't got a lot of greats as well, but I think that's one of the main reasons now is because they just want financial success. And a lot of times that's just horror movies.
Well, I won't disagree with you there. We've come to this point right now where it is not just the small studios producing horror films like Blumhouse, but there's also the big studio producing horror films that are also much more. The budgets are much higher. The success of Sinners and Weapons from last year, or even Nosferatu from a couple years ago, is testament to that. These are much bigger budgeted movies than your typical Blumhouse film, or even the films like what was it, Skinamarink from Shudder, and some of the other, or was it in a Violent Nature, or some of the more low budget horror films out there that seem to make a lot of money. But the thing is, there's a difference in not only aesthetics, but also in quality in some of those films. Because for every Sinners we have out there, there's going to be 5 or 6 Return to Silent Hills. Because even though that movie was directed by Christopher Gans, who did the original movie, That movie came and went so fast, and it's not a very good film either.
Yeah. And again, it's like what you see is, and again, it's like you'll just, and it's just cranking and cranking and cranking. And like I said, all the studios are doing it now and stuff. And the thing is, uh, again, and they don't give their movies a lot of budget, and then they usually make their money back. Like even some, and then, again, we're seeing now, horror movies getting a like they usually doesn't get a like to. I mean, for Pete's sakes, uh an actress in a horror movie won an Oscar for her role in a horror movie. You would never, ever think that would be a thing, but now it's happening. And so now there's more eyes on it. I mean, Sinners won so many awards, and it is a horror movie. It is technically a horror movie, and it won all these Oscars and stuff. You would never, ever, like 10, 20 years ago, the idea of a horror movie winning anything in the Oscars was unheard of. They would laugh you out the door if you said, "Hey, I think some horror movies are going to start winning Oscars." But that's where we're at nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. And we mentioned horror, and the bigger budgets are come and with, like I said, Sinners and Weapons. You also have the Predator Badlands, where the budget was much bigger than you expect for a horror action hybrid film. Because I bring that up because the original movie was designed to be a horror action movie, but the new one's more of a sci-fi action movie. But still, it appeals to those people who enjoyed the first film or the last two films in the Dan Trachtenberg series of Predator films. Now, that brings me to something that I also want to get into, which is the modern day trend of the remake, reboot, legacy sequels. Because I believe this is one of the big reasons why we have a lot of bad horror films. Also, you have all these studios out there who are trying to kind of bring back old ass IP in either a new sequel like Final Destination Bloodlines, or a reboot, or a reboot like what's that, Child's Play remake, or something like Scream 6, 5, 6, and 7, which are legacy sequels. And we're seeing that huge trend there, but we all know that these don't always work. Because of why?
I
What do you
and you it's a problem is, and this is just in Hollywood in general, and it's not even exclusive to horror movies, but horror movies we're seeing it a lot of like Scream 7. We just had Scream 7 come out this year. And again, that was something that everyone was just like, what was the point? Last year you had the legacy sequel of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like
which I've talked
again,
about a lot on this show as being one of the worst movies I saw last year. Yes.
again, and I think a lot of the problem with a lot of those too is, I- again, it's like talking about like a legacy thing. We're getting another scary movie. Like
I know.
after how long that series was just dead and stuff. Now we're at the point now we're getting legacy sequels for the horror parodies and stuff.
Uh,
Like
yeah.
that is where we're at now and stuff.
Which is really sad because I actually think that the new one's going to be funny as shit, and I don't even like the original Scary Movie, but the new one looks funny as shit.
I mean, even recently and stuff, we had the Universal's laughable Dark Universe like thing where they were trying to do legacy sequels, or they were trying to do, well, they're trying to do
Reboots.
reboots
That
of
one I'm
all
going
of,
to call a reboot.
yeah, no, the reboots of the old monster movies. And again, that got laughed out the door and died very, very quickly. And it's just like, and the problem is a lot of it is, it's the reason why a lot of these legacy stuff doesn't work is because they don't do it in a creative way. It is just nostalgia, nostalgia, Easter eggs, nostalgia, Easter eggs. It just, that is how a lot of these legacy sequels go and stuff, or reboots, and it's just not as good. It's not as good as the original. We don't see a lot of remakes happening where again they do better than the original.
So I want to touch on this because I think this is one of the reasons why we have so many bad movies out there. Like the I'm gonna stick with the Legacy sequel first because we ended up having really great, or let's say a really great financially Legacy sequel with the recent Scream movies. For 5, 6, and 7 by all means, and 7 ended up being the most profitable of the or make the most money. I do not think it's the most profitable because it costs so much more than the other ones that came before it. Because of the salaries for all the actors now, so they're spending more money on these damn movies. Like I Know What You Did Last Summer, the Legacy sequel. There, they spent all this money to get these actors in there, but the problem is with the Scream ones, they added new characters that were interesting, and some of the filmmaking styles are what for me are what made it fresh and innovative. But with I Know What You Did Last Summer, it was so generically made. And the entire story was so generic. And I was like, oh my God, I was embarrassed for the people who were in that film. And they had some good actors in a really shitty ass movie. I don't know if you actually which ones did you see? Did you see the Scream ones in the I Know What You Did Last Summer, or did you skip some of those?
I skipped last summer because I knew it was going to be bad,
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
and I was corrected on that. And then with Scream 7, I wasn't interested because the whole thing leading up to the last couple screams and stuff, again, because of the stuff behind the scenes, they're like, okay, well, we're going to basically just kill off this story that we're leading up to with this third one, and we're just going back to just the generic Legacy sequel of okay, now it's just now we're back to Sydney and again and doing Sydney's story, and then again like and then we're going to, again, this is a problem with Legacy sequels, we're going to put in the hint of, oh, someone whose career is coming back is oh gosh,
Matthew Lillard.
Matthew Lillard. Thank you, Matthew Lillard. And then again, they don't even commit to that. They don't even fully commit to that and stuff. And it's but why do they have Matthew Lillard? Because again, Easter eggs and nostalgia. It's to make people go, "Oh, I love the first Scream, and Matthew Lillard was in the first Scream. Let me go see it."
I agree with you on that. I believe that the reason why that one was so much more successful than the far superior part 5 and 6 is because of the people who may have only seen the first film in the franchise and they saw all the actors returning from that film in there. I guarantee you that's why it made so much money, because it's not, in my opinion, a very strong film, because I believe it's more generically directed. And don't get me wrong, I love Kevin Williamson. He's a great writer. But he has not done enough movies as a director to have created a style that's all his own. Whereas the fifth and sixth film I thought were extremely well done in terms of style and story, and bringing in new characters as well. So I thought those were much more effective as Scream sequels than I did the part 7. And that's the problem I had with I Know What You Did Like Summer. It's so generic. It's almost like a made for TV movie. It just happens to have these stars in it: Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar, who makes a cameo, and even Brandy, who makes a cameo in there. And I'm like, oh, they bring all these actors back to make one of the most generic slasher films in the last decade. And I was like, oh my God. But
I
that's
think
Go
the
ahead.
the thing with that is, again, and a lot of the reasons these legacy things do not work, and even comes to other ones that we've talked about, like Firestarter is a good example, is the original versus the remake, is nowadays everything is so much safer than it was back then. There was a lot more risk. My best example I will always pull out is, how many times do you see a horror movie nowadays where a kid gets killed? You don't see it often, uh, especially in a theatrical setting. Like we're seeing it now. Like that's why I gave so much praise for Welcome to Derry and stuff, because you saw kids get killed again, which is a breath of fresh air. Because nowadays, you do not see kids get killed often in horror movies anymore.
I think the most recent one would be the sequel for Evil Dead Rise. I think was
Yeah,
probably the last one I saw,
yeah,
which was
and,
a great movie, by the way, a
yeah.
great sequel.
But
Well, yeah, it's a sequel. It's a sequel that kind of like doesn't have anything to do with any of the previous movies, really, which is what I loved about it as well, because it was refreshing. It wasn't generic when you watch that movie, and I think that's what makes the those films good. I think the bad.
it's an original idea in that world.
Yes, yes. And I think that's the problem that I have with a lot of these remakes, reboots, and legacy sequels. Because you brought up Firestarter, which I had forgotten because it's so freaking generic, and the visual effects, because everything's fire, looks so CGI, it doesn't look real. Like when you're watching the original one with Drew Barrymore, those fire effects look fucking real as shit. But when you're watching the remake, it all looks CGI fake because it is, and you don't have that same that feeling that anyone's in any real danger. Like they can't, if the characters can't feel it's hot in the room, the audience doesn't feel it's hot in the room, and therefore it's not scary or suspenseful.
And that's another thing too, is again, the difference between modern versus movies back then is again with being the safeness, it's not only safeness in story, but safeness in filmmaking because everything is CGI. Back then, you don't they didn't really CGI was not a big thing, or if it did, it looked terrible. It looked like the Lawnmower Man. So it's like so a lot of times everything had to be practical, which is why a great comparison is the thing, the original versus the remake and stuff. And the thing is, again, compare again, every like night and day difference.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing with a lot of these horror movies now is they're just too CGI. And so, like again, it's not as impactful when you're watching some of this stuff versus back then where it was actual practical. And again, it doesn't matter even to today. If you watch something practical versus watching something with CGI, you are automatically be more engaged when it's practical.
No, no, that's another good point to bring up why a lot of these more modern horror films are just bad. Is because once you see bad CGI, unless it's a movie designed to have bad CGI, like say Sharknado or Birdemic, you just kind of assume that the CGI is going to be bad, and usually it is, because horror films do not, on average, try and have the budgets to do these huge, elaborate, realistic fire effects or water effects or the creatures. As many shark movies that are being made nowadays, it is so rare to see one that where the sharks look realistic as shit because they have the budget to do it. There are more of those out there that make it look fake and completely realistic, and it takes you out of the film automatically. Whereas something like Jaws, where they have the practical effect when it worked, still has this gravitas to it that still scares people because it's still more realistic and practical than anything being done today. Um, so it's good that you brought that up because I actually didn't have the CGI argument on my list to make sure we talked about. But that's a huge argument why we have so many bad films out there. So unless
Yeah,
it's
it's
Shark
just you again, it's just a lot of times filmmaking, horror filmmaking has become so much safer now than it does before. I mean,
Hmm?
it's funny because a lot of it has changed too about the genres too. Because back then, right, the 90s, 80s and stuff, the horror movies that would get the most sequels were the slashers. It was the Jasons, it was the Freddys, it was the Chuckies, it was, Hills
Slasher
Have
film, 80s and
Eyes.
90s. Yep.
It was the slashers. And now, modern day, it's the possession movies. It's in the Insidious. It's the
Conjuring universe.
Conjuring. It's the Conjurings. It's like that is now the Paranormal Activity.
Yep.
Like possessions have now become the thing that gets the sequel bait and stuff. While slashers, other than Scream, no really other slashers are getting sequels after sequel after sequel anymore because it's just not the thing. Now it's, and again, and creature, I mean, you, other than sharks, I mean, you think about creature stuff. I mean, back then you had Koju, you had Birdemic, like you had, again, there was, back then there was all these creature that was just all the movies that it, versus now it's like the last spider focused movie was Sting, I think, that came out like,
Sting and Infested came out about the same exact time. But
which
for everyone
came
else
out
who's out
years
there,
ago.
I'm
We
not.
just,
Yeah.
we,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
we just had Primate this year,
Yeah, we have Primate.
which was like the first time in a long time, like something of that creature slasher thing has happened in such a long time. Like, because again, nowadays it's possession movies. That is the bread and butter. That is the easy way out. If you look at the last couple movies that have come out, and stuff, they're possession movies.
Now, I'm going to segue into something else because you mentioned this. I also think the reason why those are so successful is that, and they're really successful. They're not just like moderately successful. They are extremely profitable and successful. Is the fact that I think that those are geared more towards general horror audiences as well. I think general or like I'm in the 80s and the 90s, horror films kind of like stayed towards horror fans. But at some point in the 2000s and 2010s, 2000s especially tried to gear again towards the teen audience. And then when the Hostel movies came out, and the torture porn, they started going towards older teens and the a slightly older audiences. And by now, they're now kind of gearing towards general audiences because in the 2000s people were used to seeing television actors in horror films all the time with all the snappy pop music in it, and so now those general audiences are looking towards something that's much more safer and not so extreme, like the Conjuring films and the Insidious and the Paranormal Activity franchise that lasted for God knows how long. I mean, like I think there's 8 movies in that franchise now. I'm like, dude, I barely liked the first one. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. But general audiences and studios just assumed general audiences wanted those type of sanitized suspense horror films and not so much the stuff that was popular in the late 90s, early 2000s, like the Hostel and what are some of the other torture porn? High Tension and
So
yeah, so the Saw movies, yeah, which were probably the apex of the whole torture porn before Paranormal Activity stole the crown. People wanted those type of movies, and then people stopped watching them. I don't think there's been a torture porn type film out. Now we've got something different called the splatter gore mean as hell killing machine movie like the Terrifier, which is like still fathoms. I still can't fathom how successful the second and third film of that is. It's just crazy what audiences are looking for. But what I want to say is that you don't really care for the possession films, and yet there's so many of them out there. Not to mention movies that are like the what was it the Father Amorph film. It was Father Exorcist. Russell Crowe did 2 Exorcist movies within
yeah,
2 years. I was like, one was based on Father Amorph, a real person, and then the other one was like the making of the Exorcist movie. And it's so crazy that he did both those movies. Don't get me wrong. The Pope's Exorcist was one of them. I actually enjoyed both of those. The Exorcism was the other one. I actually enjoy both those movies, but those are like, you're sticking Russell Crowe in a possession movie? I was like, what? Yeah.
it's bad with that because literally the Pope's Exorcist didn't do good because everyone was like, "Oh, I already saw that." They got themselves confused because Russell Crowe has been in 2 separate possession movies.
I thought they were both okay, but they are definitely geared towards general audiences. They were both designed, and I think that right there is big studios making these type of films, and that can be detriment to the horror genre because when you have too many of those type of movies that are geared towards general audiences, you kind of alienate the horror fans who have been with the genre forever. they haven't stepped away. They still watch the horror movies that are like Dead Silence, and they watch the stuff that's like Good Boy, the indie film that and they watch the stuff that's extreme, like in a violent nature, which don't appeal to general audiences at all, but they appeal to us horror fans, who kind of probably all ignored the Pope's Exorcist, until it came out on streaming services.
Again, In the Violent Nature was the first time in a long time that we saw them. That and like Hard Eyes were two movies that were slasher horror movies that were not connected. And even A Violent Nature is basically a commentary slash that was
Yeah.
in a lot of sense that was a homage to like Jason and stuff, like the
Yes.
Jason movies and stuff. But like Hard Eyes, that was one thing I gave a lot of compliments when about that movie was that's one of the first times in a long time we saw them trying to do an original slasher movie and not a slasher movie that is just again a like What You Did Last Summer and Scream, where it was a legacy sequel. Like Hard Eyes was the first time we've seen them trying to do a original slasher movie.
Yeah. But you know
You don't
what?
see those often.
You don't, not slasher. No, you don't, unless it's like a straight to streaming low budget movie. They still do a lot of them that way because I guess it's easy to get away with a cheesy slasher movie on streaming services. But you're right, for mainstream audiences, and even Blumhouse, who puts out tons and tons of fucking horror movies, you rarely ever see. Has he? I don't even know if he's done a slasher movie yet. Actually, to be honest with you, he's done horror movies produced horror movies on just about everything else. Oh, okay. We'll include his Halloween trilogy, which is a legacy sequel series. So that you
Yep.
go. But you bring up something that I like to talk about, because the thing is with these type of movies, we start getting into all what we call not only the more and they're bringing this back, this term. I hate this term, but it's such a very modern term that people gravitate towards, which is the prestige horror film, like the new Nosferatu or Good Boy or some or Bring Her Back, or some of these films right here where they can get these well-known actors to be in these kind of indie horror films, or Hereditary or Heretic, all these great horror films. Thankfully we have A24 and Neon and some of those studios who do this type of stuff, because we have some of those, but we also still have a lot of those crappy ones out there, because for every good boy, I'm gonna say this, even though it was profitable, you have a Skinamarink. I'm gonna bring that up. Even though it was profitable, I don't know what the fuck those filmmakers were going through or smoking or taking when they made that goddamn movie. And it's like, yeah, but you know,
And that's another thing we're seeing a lot more of, like more horror movie content is Shudder. It's because we literally have a streaming service dedicated to that stuff. Uh,
yeah.
like we literally have a horror movie streaming service with Shudder, and that's another reason why we're just getting cranking out more and more and more horror movies and stuff. Because
Yeah,
we wouldn't
that's
get Steamer Ring got like a theatrical release. That would never got a theatrical release a couple years ago, but because we're getting so many horror movies, it's just crank, crank, crank.
So that's the thing. We are getting a lot of horror films, and some of them are successful, and some of them aren't. And it seems to be that because we have the prestige horror films, and we have the films that apply to general audiences, and then those that go to our real horror fans, we have a plethora of different types of horror films. Who would have thought that? And and for everyone listening, we'll bring this up constantly because Sinners is the odd horror film that can appeal to both general audiences, horror fans, and people who don't ever go see horror. Because of not only the music aspects, but the period aspects and Michael B. Jordan's presence, among other great cast members in that fucking movie, and the fact that Coogler directed it, and everyone he's like he's one of the it boy directors out there who can do no wrong right now because he's got such original ideals out there, and he's utilizing his platform to get some of the more interesting films out there made. Same with Krieger, who did Barbarian and Weapons. I mean, he's got the next what's he doing? He's got another horror movie coming out that
Yeah.
doesn't need a horror movie. Resident Evil. Resident Evil. I think he's the one doing the new Resident Evil. Um
Yeah,
so what
he
well
is.
we just say that.
And
I have
he's
another
again, he's
a
promised to do
reboot.
a unique.
What was
Yeah.
that?
And he's allegedly doing a different take on Resident Evil and stuff. That's just like, okay, we'll see. But again, yeah, it is Resident Evil.
It's Resident Evil. I mean, like, oh yeah, there's another, but I can say the same thing for Mike Flanagan, who's doing Carrie and on task to do another fucking remake of The Mist. Like, we don't need another fucking Mist right now. It's not that old, in my opinion. Why the fuck are we doing another Mist? The last one's a fucking perfect movie. But we all love Mike Flanagan because he has done no wrong in most everything he's done as a director and writer. So it's kind of like that. I mean, I guarantee you, that's another great thing and a bad thing because a lot of these horror movies are being done by directors who may have started out in horror, but they remain in horror. They haven't gone off to go do more prestigious stuff like oh my god, Sam Raimi went off to stop do horror to go do Spider-Man and everything else, or Peter Jackson who went off to go do the Lord of the Rings films, stuff like that. These directors like Krieger and I keep missing so many of these great directors out there. Eagers are all staying within that little world of horror, which is good. Because one of the bad things about horror, the horror genre, modern day horror, is because they're giving a lot of leeway with a lot of first time directors and people to do movies, and they're not really that good. They don't have the style. I think style is also lacking in a lot of modern day horror films. I mean, I just mentioned that earlier with Scream 7 with Kevin Williamson's lack of style with the way he did the Scream 7 versus the filmmakers who did 5 and 6. So
I mean, that's why for me, a lot of the modern day horror movies, I'm very selective about because, especially the possession movies, because they all look the same to me to a point. I watched the trailer again, like Insidious and Conjuring to me are different franchises, but man, do they feel the same to me if I watch the trailers. If I watch both trailers back to back, and I they blend for me. They blend for me so much.
well, they're supposed to. They were both started by James Wan, dude.
Yeah.
But
And
James Wan created the style for the films. But you mentioned that, but the thing is, Lee Winnell directed his first film with Insidious, three or four. I don't remember which one he did. And he has created his own style with Upgrade and Wolfman and The Invisible Man. And so he's come a long way in just the 4 or 5 films he's directed because he was originally a writer. And
yeah.
sometimes we get that. Not all the time, not all the time, but sometimes we get that.
Yeah, and I'll give credit like and I'll give a lot of credit to oh gosh, weapons director. With Zach Krieger, it's like his movies are feeling different. Like they feel a little different and stuff. But that's the thing is like I think there's a lot of depending on the genre, I think certain genres are getting pigeonholed where they feel the same, and I will
Yeah.
give credit that some genres aren't. For me personally, a lot of the possession genres are getting feel very formulaic. Uh, while and that was a complaint back in the day with the slashers and stuff, which is why
Yeah.
that was one thing that really messed up that did a lot of unintentional damage was the Cabin in the Woods just completely decimated the slasher genre and stuff because it ripped it apart about the formula with it and stuff that eventually with the Halloween legacy sequels and stuff that got fixed a little bit. But I mean, it's also crazy if you think about it, of like nowadays you would like it's also crazy to me about what's getting the legacy sequels and what isn't, because you think back in the day, you think of the big titans of horror, you think of Jason, you think of Freddy, and it's like even stuff like Chucky and stuff, and you're not we got one legacy sequel with uh Nightmare on Elm Street that did horribly, and that
That
just has
wasn't a
been gone.
legacy sequel. That was just a reboot, dude.
Yeah, sorry. That was more of a reboot. You're correct. That was a reboot. They messed it up, never tried again. Uh Poor Jason has been in purgatory hell
Purgatory Hell.
for forever. Who
And I
knows?
like that reboot for that one. I actually did like the reboot for the remake. I actually like that. But yeah,
I did too. And honestly, the concepts they were talking about, like, oh, doing like a found footage, like uh doing a found footage Friday 13th, honestly sounded kind of
yeah.
interesting and stuff. But again, it's just that's been in hell. Chucky's been relegated to TV shows now. So it's just kind of like it's funny seeing a lot of the Titans of horror back in the day, and a lot of them are either just non-existent or gone, with only the few remaining, with like Scream and some and What You Did Last Summer and stuff being like the only ones that are kind of there. But even then, those were Scream and What You Did Last Summer. That's in the early, like, that's like 90s to 2000s. But you look at a lot of the others in the 80s and 70s, a lot of those are just dead.
Yeah, it's a sad. I think the Child's Play is the only one still kicking and screaming, since Don Mancini has still control over Chucky, but not the Child's Play name. And he is working on a theatrical movie that takes place after the show, for everyone out there who's listening. So he is not giving up on the Child's Chucky series, but the studio did the reboot or remake of Child's Play. It had some good ideals, but they didn't have the someone with enough style to to make all those ideals gel into a cohesive film. So the film was a bit of a mess, kind of like the Poltergeist remake. It was a bit of a mess. There are some ideals in that. It's a bit of a mess. And we've discussed Poltergeist, the reboot or remake on this show before. So we yeah. um but what are some of the other issues that you're seeing in some of the modern day horror films that you think are a bad trend?
Again, I think we've talked a lot of about most of them, but again, it is just I think a one big one is icons. Like, you think of horror icons, again, like we just talked about, you think of Jason, you think of Freddy, you think of Michael Myers, you think of Chucky. Like, those are, even like, you think of the Xenomorph, you think of the Predator, like all of these horror icons you can think of are old. The
Yeah.
only modern day icon is probably Art the Clown. And that is it. And that's another problem I think a lot of these uh horror movies have modern day is, other than Paranormal Activity and other than you could say Conjuring, Insidious and stuff, but even then they don't have that much. I mean, you're not going to have Annabelle be like, you're not going to put Annabelle among the titans of horror and stuff.
Well,
It's like
some people
mo
are putting Annabelle in the Titans of Horror only because those damn movies are too damn successful.
they're wrong, and they're wrong because you can say show a general, someone from the public who's not a horror person. You can show them a picture of Jason, you show them a picture of Freddy, they know who they are. You show a picture of them, Annabelle, and they think that's just a random creepy doll. Like, so I do not take that.
What I see, the thing when I try and say a icon has become part of the pop culture is when you start seeing them those icons dressed up for Halloween, and then you start seeing the dolls everywhere, and you start seeing little kids as those characters. And that is what has happened to Megan, who only had two movies, and Annabelle, and it's the strangest trend. And I think it's because those are female-based characters, and that's what we don't have a lot of. I think
Yeah.
that's why that those two stick out the most. More so than even the Nun, who also has become its own little cottage industry because it's a nun. There's not enough female horror icons out there, and so the few have taken like their own little world out there. That like are they Jason and Freddy? No, but the thing is, they're the only female ones out there, and I'm trying very hard to think about any other ones other than those three as female icons. I don't know if you can or not, but
I mean, Carrie's like the other one of like back in the day.
yeah, but the thing about Carrie is Carrie just looks like Carrie, or like a girl. You have to have a dress and her with pig's blood in her head. But it's a far cry from Megan, which has got that stupid dress and and the mask, and then you see people dancing like the Megan dance, which was the craziest shit that I've seen. Is that when that became a meme and a whole thing. That icon stuff may have been killed with the second Megan movie, and there's another thing, but we'll have to bring that up. The fact that when the genre changes, it kind of alienates audiences, is another trend that we see also. But yeah, there's just so few female horror icons out there, and they've gravitated towards the ones that are more modern. Like I don't think there is an old one. I mean, even the Strangers have become icons in their own right before they did the trilogy movies, just because of the mask, which is just crazy to me. I was like, because the doll face and the other one were like the only fucking thing they could do with it. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What?
So it's just, but yeah, it's just you don't have a lot of, there's not a lot of modern day horror icon titans like they were back in the day. And I think that comes again a lot to what we were saying before about just different individual like things feeling out there, things feeling different, things feeling, it's like we don't have that as much today with horror movies. We don't have things again that are very uh I wouldn't say memorable, but again, it's like there's not, you pick out you pick out your murderers, you pick out your horror icons, and again, you other than like sure I'll give Annabelle, Megan is true and stuff, and Art the Clown, but again, you struggle a lot more today
Yeah.
than you would back then.
I think that's because the audiences today, or the audiences that horror films now gravitate towards today is such diversified and diluted. So you, like I said, you see the successful films are going to be like Sinners, but do you see there being a marketing thing for Sinners at all? No, they're not going to be people dressing up like Michael B. Jordan for Halloween. Barbarian, extremely successful, but you're not going to see anyone dressing up like the mother character in Barbarian. Nosferatu, extremely successful, but you're not going to be seeing people dress up like Nosferatu. It's this thing now where the successful films like that are just are gravitating towards audiences who you normally may or may not like horror film, but they've grasped onto the cultural zeitgeist. Even Art the Clown, which should have never been successful, never in a billion years been successful, but that second Terrifier movie did something. It was lightning in a fucking bottle, and it didn't repeat its success with the third one, but the third one was extremely successful because the budget was so low. Now, I am not a huge fan of Terrifier 1 and 3. I think they are subpar movies. I did like the second one. I thought the second one was really well done. But I do not understand the allure for Art the Clown, other than the fact that it's a fucking clown, and people are generally terrified of clowns. I don't know what your take is on it. I don't even know. We've never discussed the Terrifier movies. I'm not even sure if you've seen the Terrifier movies or not.
I've seen a little bit of it. It's the torture porn that I'm not a big fan of because that's all it is. But again, talking about like again the practical effects, again, a lot of why honestly I think the Terrifier movies are work as well as they do too is it's practical. They use practical effects for a lot of those. And I think that's because I think if you do the Terrifier movies and you do CGI, I don't think those movies would be as popular than they are because all of it is practical and stuff. I think it raises its stock a lot with the horror fans because it is practical. Um, but no, I mean like with Art the Clown, like again, like he's got an iconic look, and again, it's there's stuff you can associate with him and stuff. I mean, again, like you using Megan as a good example, there's a reason Megan uh gripped on to people and stuff because yeah, Megan had the stupid dance. Like that was I mean, that was the mark I mean, they changed the marketing all around once they realized they had gold in their hands because everyone thought the dancing was stupid but fun and stuff. And again, we don't see a lot of that. And I think another thing too, talking about the problem with modern day movies and stuff, but this is also a problem just in general, is spoilers and just marketing in general, like you kind of said. The thing is, back in the day, we would have horror movies. Again, like Jaws is a great example, as you mentioned, where you watch the trailers for Jaws, you never saw the shark.
Nope, nope.
It
Uh nope. You bring up a very valid
was
point.
made, you would have seen that shark a billion times. And that's the thing is, there's no mystery anymore with a lot of the stuff. You know what things look like. They'll spoil it all the time. So there's no mystery. There's no lore to some of this stuff too. And so it's like, so yeah, and that's it's just like, oh, I know what the thing looks like. I'm gonna go see it. And I think that's another thing that's lacking a lot with today's stuff. Like that's something I'll give credit to Barbarian.
Hmm.
You did not see what that creature looked like in the trailers.
No.
And it kept you guessing and it brought the lore, even with weapons. Like again, Zach Krieger is one of the modern day people who kind of picks up a little bit of that of keeping the allure, keeping the mystery. And that's why I think he's becoming one of the more successful horror movie people nowadays, is because he keeps the allure of stuff.
I'm going
Um,
to add to that because I'm going to add to that by saying that was one of the problems I think people had with Megan 2.0 is they showed everything in the trailer, and when people got the ideal that it was not the same type of movie the first movie was, they didn't go see it. And people
mhm.
thought, the filmmakers, and don't get me wrong, I love Megan 2.0, but for not for the reasons that I should love Megan 2.0, because you're right, it is not like the first film. It did like a 180 tone difference, and it was completely different, and it turned people away. The same thing happens in 28 years later, and 28 years later, The Bone Temple. After they saw the ending of the first one, that turned so many people away from seeing the sequel because they saw that holy shit, there's a huge tone difference here, and I don't think I'm gonna go see the second film. And they're giving, and that's part of the thing of giving away. I guarantee you, if they had not put that little tag in at the end of the fucking movie, people would have gone to see the second one with no problems whatsoever. I guarantee
Yep.
you.
Yep, that's exactly right. And again, it's this marketing today is that you got to show everything. You show everything. You show everything. I'm in Scream 7. How do they get the hook they try to hook you with? You got to have Matthew Lillard deliver a line at the end and stuff. Because again, that was the hook. That was
That was
that was I mean, imagine Scream 7 not knowing Matthew Lillard was going to be providing stuff in it, and you hear his first thing, and you just immediately get sucked into it.
uh-huh.
Never what happened nowadays, and that's the thing is, again, modern day marketing is not like that. You
No.
got to show everything.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that with Scream 7 because the moment I saw him in the trailer, I was like, "Oh shit, that's CG. I mean, that's AI shit. They're trying to make it modern. He's still dead. The hook would be trying to figure out exactly why they decided to use him as a villain. And that's exactly what I got when I watched the movie. And I was not surprised at all by anything I saw in Scream 7. And it was completely opposite of what I saw in Scream 5 and 6. Um, yeah, and I actually thought that the tone tried to borrow a little bit from the Terrifier movies because those were so damn successful. I thought that some of the killings in Scream 7 were mean spirited, which I don't tend to like in a horror movie anymore. I think the 80s were like the heyday, and 70s and 80s were the heyday of that type of mentality. Um, but in these more modern day films like Terrifier and like Scream 7, I felt that the horror was mean spirited. And that kind of turns me off, which is why I only like Terrifier 2. I didn't like the third one. I thought the third one was completely mean spirited. I was like, I don't want to watch that. I was
And
like,
another a good comparison example of movies that again did trailers and stuff, but again showed things differently was They Will Kill You versus Ready or Not 2.
mhm.
You watch the trailer for Ready or Not 2, you know everything. They spoil everything. They spoil the fact that there's a sister involved. They literally tell you the plot. They literally Elijah Wood tells you this is what's happening. You watch They Will Kill You, and there's a lot in that trailer that doesn't tell you what's going on. You have no idea the
Yeah,
length that movie's going to go and
yeah,
stuff.
I was thank God you saw it at the theater and I didn't, but I was thank God you didn't tell me some of the details in the movie because when I watched the movie, I was pleasantly surprised when I saw it at the theater. I was like, you know, this movie was going this way. Well, shit, I like this now. And I liked that. I like the fact that they didn't tell me everything in the trailers. And I agree with you. I think a lot of the movies are ruined by a lot of the marketing is like over explaining everything. I think they're trying to get the general audiences to go see these films, so they think they have to sugarcoat everything and spell everything out for general audiences, which I think is sad. I think Krieger has been lucky enough that for with Weapons and Barbarian, half that shit is not explained in the trailer, and it made those films so much more enjoyable to watch. So and Scream 7, like everything's in the fucking trailer for Scream 7. I'm like, dude, yeah.
I mean, even Sinners, like I only watched the first trailer because I knew the trailers that came after. Like in the first trailer, you don't really know what's going on. You think it could be you don't know what's happening, but then you watch the next trailer they release after that, and it tells you it's vampires and
Yeah.
stuff, and it's just like oh man, like you know you don't again it's like a lot it's rare days now that you see that stuff. Like again, I gave a lot of praise to the movie. I will always pull this out of my pocket. Is Cloverfield is again it is a creature film that did not show you the creature. It was the modern day Jaws of that. It did not show you the creatures in the trailer, and that was its marketing, where you're trying to figure out what the creature looked like. You would never see that nowadays. Never see that nowadays. Nowadays, if it's a creature feature, they're going to show you. If it's a monster movie, they're going to show you. There's no questions about what the monster looks like, what the monster is. They're
Uh,
going to show it to you.
Yeah, I don't think they do those type of movies anymore. Anyways, films. I remember for Deep Rising when that came out, they didn't show the monster in the trailer for Deep Rising, and that kind of hurt the movie because people thought it was a different type of movie. But I love aquatic horror movies, so you know, I went to go see it at the theater. But I think there's a really good balancing act, and depending on modern day films, uh, I think one of the detriments to horror in the modern day era is the fact that some studios, I think studios especially, big studios especially, think that they need to sugarcoat the movie for general audiences. Where people like A24, Neon, and Screen Gems, and some of the other smaller boutique labels get away with not showing you a lot. They get away with just creating this sense of dread and suspense, and it gets you um into the theater. I'm trying to remember the movie with the hand. Talk is it called Talk to Me? Uh
Yeah.
Yeah, talk to me. Like I didn't know all the stuff that was going to happen, but that was also refreshing because it was Australian. I think it's Australian. I don't want to say it's Australian or New Zealand. I sometimes get them confused. But that whole idea of having it in a different country also appealed to me as a horror fan because I just was kind of tired of seeing the same old Americans do the same old shit over and over again. Um, but I didn't get all of that plot when I watched that movie. And I was like, oh, this movie's great. I was like, oh, I was pleasantly surprised by that movie, and the other movie that came out after that with the same filmmakers, which for some reason I mentioned earlier, but now I'm drawing a blank.
Uh,
Bring Her
it's
Back.
Bring Her to Me, or
Bring
Bring
Her
Her
Back.
Back, Bring Her
Yeah,
Back.
which I also enjoyed, and I didn't know what was going on in that fucking movie either when I watched. I was like, by the time I got to the end, I was like, holy fucking shit! It's like Hereditary. And I know there's a lot of people who don't like Hereditary, and I don't know why. That fucking movie's great. But you don't know anything that's gonna happen at the end of that movie because they don't tell you. You're as surprised. You're as surprised as everyone else is by the reveals in the final act of that movie because it just goes really fucking crazy and it's great. But and I think that right there is part of the great thing about a lot of great modern day horror movies that keeps us going back for more. But that's also the problem with revealing too much, and you feel like you've seen it before, so you have no interest in seeing it. So it's a double edged sword. It's a double edged sword, and I think it really has to depend on who's producing it and how much money's behind it. If it's a low budget movie, they can afford not to have every person in the world go see it. If it's a big budget movie like Scream 7, they need to appeal to a general audience so that everyone tries to go to see it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We all know Scream 7 was extremely successful, the most successful of the franchise. But I Know What You Did Last Summer pretty much went unnoticed by everyone. Um,
But
so
even then, I think it didn't do bad in the box office. I think it actually,
broke
because again,
even.
everything's cheap. Yeah, everything was cheap. It was a box office success. Like,
So I don't know of anyone who actually liked it. The television show was better than the fucking movie was.
yeah.
Yes, there is a television show for I Know What You Did Last Summer, and it was far superior to that crap they put out at the theater. Or actually, it's far superior to the other two sequels as well. Uh, so if you want to, I Know What You Did Last Summer, just go watch the show. It's much better. Um, and so, is there anything else you could think of? Because there's one last thing I do want to make sure that I bring up in terms of the problems with modern day horror. But I want to see if you had anything before I mention mine.
Go ahead and mention yours.
Okay, so the other problem with modern day horror is the streaming services. Every streaming service and their mother believes that they have to have horror films on their service. And we are getting a glut of god awful horror films. And I do mean bad. I mean horrible. And they're marketing this shit like it's the coming of Jesus on these. And I don't say that lightly. I like literally I have watched so many bad original Tubi movies, original even some of the Shudder movies are so mediocre and bad. And even some of the Blumhouse movies, and I think Jason Blum has got fucking movies on every streaming service now. Like he's got so many movies out there, it's ridiculous, and so many of them are less. They're just bad because they are producing so many of these for such a low budget that they have nothing but to be bad. Like they're so generic. They're generic and there's like first time directors directing this shit, so they're not suspenseful. But you know why I watch them? Because someone comes up with a great fucking poster that advertised that shit. And I was like, oh, this might be interesting. Let me watch this. Click. I stream it and I'm like, oh my God, I'm putting a drill in my head to stop watching this movie. It's so bad. And everyone who's listened to me talk on the show knows I will sit through anything. It could be horrible, 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 and I will sit through that movie no matter what, because that's just the way I am, and I want to support all horror films no matter how bad they are. But everyone knows I saw a lot of bad movies, including the low budget trend now of doing horror films based on public domain figures. That is the one of the worst trends out there right now. I don't know if you've seen any. Have you seen any of those movies actually, Philip? I've never asked you that.
No, because I know they're bad. I could tell. The those movies are again like back in the day when you're watching the Sci-Fi Channel and it's a sci-fi original horror movies and stuff, you know they're gonna be bad. You know they're gonna be terrible and campy and terrible. So I would not even waste my time. And again, that kind of comes to what I was saying earlier about like with Shudder and stuff. It's like nowadays, good and bad, it is easier to get your film out there for any filmmakers listening to this. Is easier to get your film out there than ever before because with all the streaming services out there, you have options. Again, you're seeing so many movies getting released nowadays that probably would never have gotten released because they would never been able to get a theatrical release. Streaming service to put it on, and you can do it.
So,
That also means literally everything's getting put out, and it's good and bad.
so I do want to mention to a lot of audience members out there that I have seen a plethora of these fairy tale movies from Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare to all of the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey films, Popeye the Slayer Man, Scream Boat. I saw two of the three Popeye movies. There did three of them last year, and I saw two out of the three. I haven't seen all of them. The what was it? The Hook movie, which was yeah, and you kind of wonder, you kind of wonder, like, are any of these films other than the Winnie the Pooh, the Poohniverse, successful? Because those movies actually had theatrical releases and actually made money based on the fact that the budgets were not even $1 million. But the Hook movie, the Popeye the Slayer Man, and all the other ones that I've seen, I can't imagine that they're making a shit ton of money off of these films, and they're straight to streaming films, and they're not good. But they have the same mentality that the Terrifier movies are. They are very mean spirited in the violence that's depicting in them. And I was like, and I don't really know who the audience is for these films, other than I wish I knew someone else who had seen some of these movies other than me. But among all of the guests that we have on Conversations in Horror, I seem to be the only one who has seen any of these fucking movies. So I don't know. So if you're listening to the podcast, please let me know if you've seen some of these fairy tale public domain horror films. I would love to know what you thought of some of them because I just am not hearing anyone talk about these movies. But they are a trend that is not dying any soon because every fairy tale public domain ideal is being made into a horror film. So you had The Ugly Stepsister last year, which I think is the only one that I've heard anyone say is really good. But I also think that's a foreign film, so that probably is why it's good. Um, but yes, that's a trend that I don't see ending anytime soon since the Poohniverse has got, I think, Pinocchio Unstrung coming up, and you can now watch Bambi the Reckoning now streaming. So, are there any other ideals or trends that you think we should discuss for why we have what's wrong with the modern horror film today, Philip?
No, I mean that pretty much it is that. And that's not to say again there aren't great modern day horror movies. There are.
Yeah, there's tons.
It is just a lot nowadays again, a lot of horror movies, other than if they're made sometimes again, unless they're made there's certain directors out there still doing it. We didn't mention his name at all, but I'm gonna go ahead and mention now. Jordan Peele's another one of
Yeah.
like another like who again, unfortunately now has been kind of MIA in directing another horror movie and stuff, but he was another horror movie director that was starting to like again, Get Out was a horror movie that again was before we got Sinners, before we got like that was the one that didn't get Oscars and stuff, but it was one of the more recent that got out there to the general public and stuff. Uh So we are seeing that, but there is again with the good there is bad, and there is a lot more. There's less risk taken a lot more now with a lot of these movies nowadays. That would be nice to for to see some of the old remnants of the past horror movies come back today.
It will be. It's not done that often. I am very hopeful for the Evil Dead Burn, a movie that's coming out because it's a sequel to now a long-running franchise. After Army of Darkness, we hadn't seen shit for like a long ass time. Then they did a remake, and then they did a spin-off, and now they have yet another one. And that's a trend I hope that will expand. They've got this weird little corner universe where each movie takes place within the same universe, but they're just different stories. I actually like that concept, and I like to see that explored more in other franchises because I think that's a good way to go. I would rather see something like that than all the direct sequels like we did with Paranormal Activity that got more convoluted with each film, and you just stop paying attention to the mythology. Same with Saw. Uh, it's okay to to say that this is those franchises are great because of the continuity is like solid throughout all of them, but it seems to get really fucking convoluted. And even they had to go back and do a prequel to kind of reboot that movie with the last Saw movie. Did they call it Saw 10?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, I can't remember. They had Spiral and Jigsaw, and I'm like, did they call the last Saw 10 or not? Uh, so you can more or less start over. Yeah. So I mean, I love the horror genre. I love to see all these different types of movies being made by not only low budget filmmakers, but also seasoned filmmakers and even people who don't normally do horror film, like Coogler did with Sinners. He's not known for doing horror. It was very refreshing to see him go off and do a horror film that just also happens to be a music film. I think I would love to see more directors do that except for Ridley Scott, who
It
should stay away from the Alien franchise. But yeah,
it 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 is funny. One thing, one common trend in modern day that it's funny and it wasn't a thing back then is seeing the trend of comedy, uh, clock comedy people going into horror and making really good horror from Zach Krieger, from Jordan Peele. A lot of times, like we mentioned earlier with the movies of uh, uh, Talk to Me and stuff. Those were that's done by a duo, kind of a duo for YouTubers, which is now kind of like the newer trend we're seeing now, where we're seeing YouTubers do horror movies. Because Talk to Me again was done by YouTubers. This year we had Iron Lung, which was done by Markiplier. We're seeing now another Jacksepticeye doing like a thing on Elden Ring, which is more of a horror video game, but that's going to be a horror movie and stuff. Like, it's funny that we're seeing trends now where different people from different genres are jumping into horror and stuff, and I find that kind of fascinating.
no, no, I agree with you. Uh, and I think that's because they don't have a lot of baggage
Yeah.
with what they like. They can come in and do something refreshing. Like Jordan Peele's Get Out was refreshing. That's why it was so good. It was refreshing. It was different. It wasn't like just a trend of horror films that came before that. It was refreshing. So I think I think that's a great point to make. I think we should see more people like that. I want to see Iron Lung. I still want to see that. I haven't seen that one though. So I don't know if you saw Iron Lung, but I still want to see that one.
I did not get to see it either.
Oh shit. Any other final thoughts on our conversation in which we discuss what's wrong with the modern horror?
Nope.
All right. So for everyone listening, we hope you've enjoyed this roundtable discussion, which was really just two of us, me and Mr. Philip Ray, as we discuss this topic. We will have
A
plenty of
very
other
small table.
uh,
A very small table.
It's a very small table. This was an experiment that we hope to continue with more of our special guests, and some outside guests who have never done the show before. There are lots of great topics out there that we can discuss in regards to horror. So if there is something you would like us to discuss on the show, please let us know. Just email us, find us on social media because we're kind of everywhere, and we will make sure to add that to one of our topic discussions. From all of us here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we want you to like, share, follow, do that thing you do on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, or YouTube. And please make sure to check out our other podcast, Conversations in Hammer Studio Horrors, which is released every first and third Friday of the month. Have a great day, and we will see you on the next amazing episode. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.